All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a question that I know keeps so many of you school leaders up at night. How do we make sure our students are really ready for the future and not just for the next standardized test? We're going to dig into a case study about one district that figured out how to move performance assessments from just another project into the very heart of their system. Does this quote hit a little close to home? This is the exact feedback Smith County's leaders were getting from employers in their own community. It points to that huge, frustrating gap between what a diploma says and what a graduate can actually do. This is the exact problem performance assessments are supposed to solve. But as Smith County found out the hard way, just having a good idea isn't nearly enough. So let's start with Smith County's first try. You know, like a lot of districts, they had this big, bold vision for authentic, hands-on learning. But the first rollout, it just fell flat. It became a classic story of a familiar, failed promise, and I bet it's one many of you have seen play out before. And here it is, that classic gap between the big vision and the messy reality. The dream was to measure real-world skills, right? But what it became was an initiative in the drawer. You know the one I'm talking about. Instead of being this amazing catalyst for change, it turned into just another compliance checklist for teachers to take off. It's the perfect example of a great idea getting totally crushed because there wasn't a real system to support it. The thing is, Smith County wasn't some special case. Research actually points to these 5 totally predictable barriers that will undermine initiatives like this every single time if leadership doesn't get ahead of them. And look closely, these aren't just about teachers not trying hard enough. No, these are systemic problems. We're talking about lack of time, inconsistent scoring, and a real lack of oversight. These demand a systemic solution. So that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How did Smith County manage to pivot? How did they turn that failed initiative into a system that actually worked, one that built real trust and equity? Well, they didn't just try the same thing again, but harder. Nope. They tore it down and rebuilt their whole approach from the ground up, all based on 4 really clear, powerful pillars. Let's break them down.
Okay, Pillar 1, create as one. This was a huge mental shift. The district realized that letting every teacher design their own tasks, even with the best intentions, was creating these massive inequities from classroom to classroom. The only way to fix it was to move away from all those isolated efforts and toward a collective, shared responsibility for quality.
So the whole game changed from isolation to collaboration. Instead of every teacher designing their own little passion projects, you would cross-school teams designing tasks together. And that meant that tasks were no longer just about a teacher's personal interest. They were anchored to the district's most important standards and carefully checked for rigor and equity. And the result? Every single student, no matter their teacher, got access to a high-quality task. And if you want to see what that looks like in the real world, just check this out. A 7th grade science task went from make a poster about ecosystems, I mean, we've all seen that one, right? To this. Use 3 years of actual river data to model predator-prey interactions and then present your recommendations to a mock city council. The jump in authenticity and rigor, it's just night and day. But here's the thing, a beautifully designed task is totally worthless if it just sits in a binder on a shelf. And that brought Smith County to their second pillar, implement with fidelity. This was all about making absolutely sure that those awesome assessments were actually being used consistently in every single classroom. And this, right here, was the key leadership move. The district leadership drew a line in the sand and made it crystal clear. These are not optional. They're not extra credit. Performance assessments are a non-negotiable part of how we teach. You know, that single message completely changed the game. And they didn't just say it. They built systems to back it up. A district-wide calendar made everything predictable. The assessments were actually embedded into the curriculum, not just tacked on. And this is so critical. Principals had walk-through tools to actually monitor what was happening. That's how you close the gap between the district's vision and the classroom's reality. All right, next up, Pillar 3, score with clarity. The leaders in Smith County knew that nothing, and I mean nothing, kills trust faster than inconsistent grading. If this was going to be credible, they had to tackle the whole problem of subjective scoring head-on. So they moved away from that whole mess of subjective judgments and toward district-wide rubrics. But just as important, teachers got together to calibrate their scoring every single cycle. The rubrics weren't just grading tools. They became real tools for equity. making sure that proficient meant the exact same thing in every classroom for every kid. And the proof is right here in the data. After they put the common rubrics and calibration in place, their inter-rater reliability, which is just a fancy way of saying scoring consistency, shot up to 88%. Now, think about that. That number isn't just data. It's evidence of fairness. It proves that reliable scoring isn't some fantasy. It is absolutely achievable when you have the right systems and the discipline to use them. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important pillar: reflect for growth. Because let's be honest, an assessment is just a snapshot in time. The real magic, the real learning, happens after the work is turned in. Reflection is what turns a pile of student projects into a powerful engine for improving teaching. You know, just telling teachers to look at the data never works. It's too vague. So Smith County gave their teams a concrete 5-step protocol to follow. They'd scan the results, then zoom right into the actual student work, find the patterns and gaps, and then, and this is the key part, decide on specific next steps for instruction and actually write down their commitments. It created this powerful, closed loop of assessment and action. When you boil it all down, it really comes to this. Without a clear, structured way to reflect, all these performance assessments do is generate a bunch of artifacts. But with it, they generate real growth. It's the difference between just collecting student work and actually using it to drive targeted, meaningful improvement for everyone. So there you have it. Those are the 4 pillars that completely turned their system around. But what was the actual impact? And more importantly, what does all of this mean for you and your team? Let's look at the results and figure out how you can start applying these lessons. And here's the payoff. I mean, look at these numbers. After 3 years, 95% of classes were implementing these assessments right on schedule. That rubric reliability hit that incredible 88% mark. And 100% of the new assessments passed a tough design review. These numbers prove it. A systemic, leader-driven approach gets real, tangible results. And all of this leads to a really powerful new way of thinking. Ultimately, performance assessments aren't just a measure of student learning. They're a mirror that we hold up to our own district. They measure the health of the entire system, its ability to deliver truly equitable and authentic learning to every single child. Okay. So now comes the most important part of our time together. It's time to turn that mirror on your own system. As you think about Smith County's journey, I want you to ask your team which of their early mistakes, the isolated projects, the inconsistent grading, the lack of oversight, are we at risk of making right now? And let's get even more specific. Think back to those 5 systemic barriers we talked about at the beginning. Of those 5, time, reliability, validity, capacity, or system oversight, which one is your biggest, most urgent fire to put out? Because just naming the problem is always the first step to solving it. Look, real transformation doesn't happen in a single meeting or a big announcement. It's built through steady, disciplined action over time. So my final question to you is this. What is one concrete 45-day checkpoint your team can commit to, starting now, to begin building a better system and avoid those same traps? That's how a great idea actually becomes a reality. Thanks for joining me.